afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests of honor. Thank you very much for joining us. The Iranian People's Movement for Democracy dates back to more than a century ago that was cultivated in 1911 Constitutional Revolution. Since then, many nationalist movements were formed to safeguard the hard-fought freedom. Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh, who was a symbol of nationalism, became prime minister in 1951. He was toppled in a coup in 1953 that brought the most reactionary mullahs and colonialist power together. Mossadegh was sent to exile for the remainder of his life, and his foreign affairs minister, Dr. Hossein Fatemi, was arrested, tortured, and executed. The Shah's dictatorship suppressed all forms of peaceful and reformist political opposition and consolidated its power by publicly dissolving all political parties and forming a single party called Rastakhiz. In August 1971, the Shah ordered a widespread crackdown on all opposition groups and individuals. Subsequently, Soviet notorious Shah's Secret Service arrested more than 80% of MK's members, including all of its leaders. In the absence of political opposition, in 1979, Khomeini, the religious fundamentalist, seized the opportunity to form a theocracy and take control of the nation. The crackdown on groups, individuals, or anyone opposing the regime began. Women were the first to be subjected. Right 3 weeks after the revolution, Khomeini declared the fatwa for compulsory hijab. In response to this, on March 8, 1979, 100,000 women poured to the street chanting, "Freedom is universal." As an ally, MK supporters acted as the security and protection for these demonstrators. Despite their best effort, hundreds were wounded and arrested by Khomeini's organized mob. The Iranian women were subjected to public segregation, harassment, harsh treatment, and all their basic rights were stripped, which has continued to this day. On June 28, 1981, the MEK organized the largest rally calling for freedom. In Tehran alone, 500,000 people attended this demonstration, which was very peaceful, of course. Khomeini ordered the Revolutionary Guard to open fire on peaceful protesters, arrested and killed many of them. IRGC, Basij, plainclothes mob, and other security forces were formed as suppression entity. Unprecedented reign of terror began. Scores of people as young as 13 years old, as old as 70 years old, were put to the gallows. More than 120,000 political activists have been executed since the regime's inception. Every chapter of the last 40 years of power grab by the mullahs is a history book by itself. Indeed, the National Council of Resistance of Iran and its member organization, MEK, exposed many of the regime's crimes to the world. The regime in Tehran can realistically be characterized as misogynist, and the only way to show where women are equal to men or even higher is the extent of torture, degrading, and cruel punishment that women have endured. Many of our colleagues can describe the terrible torture they suffered. by the Revolutionary Guard and the mullahs. It is no wonder the Iranian women are in the forefront of democratic movement to bring about the change that not only the Iranian people, but the whole world needs it urgently. The Iranian resistance, President-elect Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan is a roadmap to where we want to be and deserves our dedicated support. We are ready for that change. And I hope you are ready too. Thank you very much for
thank you for listening to me. My name is Simin, and I'm a former political prisoner. I would like to share my story with you. And I have a request in the end. I was just 19. In the middle of the night, 8 men barged into my house, climbing the wall, and find their way to my bedroom, put the gun in my head, and told me, "Don't move." I remember my younger brother rushed to rescue me and said, "Where do you take my sister?" And they said, "Do you want to come?" He said, "Yes." And I remember both of us be blindfolded in front of my parents' eyes, hopelessly watching us. And they threw us in the back of the car and drove us away. On that night, I stepped into the unknown world, the world I did not know that it existed. For a year and a half, I was witness the agony and the pain that prison authority inflicted to the people that was in their care. All kind of torture, from lashing until to the point that they have to graft the skin from some part of the body and patch it to the leg, and hanging from the ceiling, depriving from sleeping, from going to the washroom, food. It was unimaginable and horrific. And for us as a woman, the final and the special torture that they did it for the girls who not married, rape before execution. That is still to this day, it gives me a chill in my spine and lumps in my throat. I cannot talk about it because I was a witness of one of them. That ordeal did not stop on, it was an isolated incident for me, and it did not stop on 1982. It is continue up to date. It is, in the eyes of Islamic Republic of Iran, the political prisoner is enemy of God, and they should be eliminated. Anywhere, anyway, by any cost. The example was the execution of 30,000 political prisoners in the summer of 1988, that I'm sure everybody know about that. Khomeini's fatwa, one word, with the stroke of the pen, he ordered to killing these people. And it carried out by Raisi, that is a present Ministry of Justice in Rouhani's government, and is a candidate for next month presidential election. The latest victim of the prison of conscience is Bahman Mahjoubi. Behnam Mahjoubi, sorry. He was arrested in a participating of Daravish Ghonawadi's sitting after 2 years of torture and depriving from any medical attention. And also he make a little audio tape and said what they did to him. They bring him to the hospital brain dead. And after 3 days that she was in ventilator, and they did not allow her mother to visit her and say final goodbye, he passed away. In Iran under Khomeini, anybody who have guts to ask questions and challenge the authority is a political prisoner and enemy of God. I give you a few examples. Maryam Akbari Monfared. Sorry. Maryam Akbari Monfared lost 4 of her siblings in a 1988 massacre. Her only question is, where did you bury my sibling? My mother died without going to their grave. I want to go. She's in prison for 12 years. This year is 12 years that she is in prison. Zainab Jalalian is a Kurdish activist. She got the sentence for life, and she is in a very bad shape right now, and she is losing her eyesight. And they did not allow him to come out or have any medical attention. Atena Daimi is a young woman who advocating for the child labor. She's saying a rich country like Iran, they should not have these kids begging to the street and pick up garbage to satisfy their life. And she's in prison for 5 years, and every year they change him from one city to another city. So for the parents, it's to be more harder to visit their daughter. Arjang Dawoodi is a teacher. He's 70 now, and he's in jail for 10 years. And the same with Mr. Khostar. He's a labor teacher, labor activist, and he's in prison. And the list goes on. Gorokh Irai, she wrote a book which did not publish yet. It's about a cruel punishment of stoning to death the woman for adultery, which the man is exemption because they can have multiple wives and have sighr. She wrote this book. She didn't publish it yet, but she's in prison for that. And under the last 40 years of this government, hardliner and reformist, 7 women was get this punishment. The list goes on. The point that I'm trying to make is, as long as Western society have business as usual, and with this regime and policy of appeasement is the way to go, nothing will change. Doesn't matter how much we sacrifice, how many people go to prison, and how many people will execute it. We cannot see freedom and justice for our loved one. And brutality and killing of these people, this regime will continue. And we cannot have free and fair society. As Mrs. Rajavi over and over said, the regime in its core does not understand diplomacy, fact-finding, cooperation. To defeat Mullah's regime in Iran, international community should stop supporting the regime by cutting their economic ties, close the embassy, and expel all the employees, and listen to the people of Iran that have a quest for change. And the time is now. Inside Iran, people are expressed their discontent by having demonstration over mismanaging and corruption in all levels of government. All the people, nurses, retirees, students, child labor activists, environmentalists, they all out. And every now and then, the people come in, they get the people who are talk, and then everything goes down again. Again, people coming out. When regime is in the point of fall, they step up their oppression, become more brutal and more execution. Rising its execution and arresting people are the testimony of this. I am asking the honorable guest today, please, please, please Listen to the Iranian people. Be the voice of tens of thousands of political prisoners who is being silenced, and advocate for new, free, democratic, and non-nuclear Iran. By participating in July Free Iran Global Summit. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope I see you all there.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks.
My name is Sabar Razai. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. I'm a third-year architecture student going into my last year of undergrad here at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. As a student, I'm thankful for the opportunities that I have to pursue an education without fear, without bias, without discrimination. But I'm always thinking of the students in Iran who, like me, have dreams and aspirations and have to struggle for those same opportunities that I take for granted. It is especially difficult for the women in Iran who have to overcome the daily obstacles under the law to marginalize them and essentially deprive them of their education. Because of my short time today, I'm unable to share with you the rich educational history of Iran that goes way back to ancient Persia and the Achaemenid Empire, which has had great influence on the modern education that we have within the world today. I will only have time to discuss the unfortunate impact that the Iranian regime has had on such a deeply rooted and essential institution. Such an impact that today students are no longer guaranteed a safe education, as they are constantly a subject to harassment and arrest. So an example of this and proof of this is the current reality for two students from Sharif University of Technology, 20-year-old Amir Hossein Moradi and 21-year-old Ali Younesi, who are both science Olympiad medal winners, winning both the silver and gold at the 2016 and 17 Olympiad in astronomy in Iran, and Ali winning another gold at the 12th International Olympiad in astronomy and astrophysics in Beijing, China in 2018. They were both arrested in April of last year without any charges, and they still remain in custody, having experienced both mental and physical torture since. Their lawyer hasn't been permitted to meet with them, only knowing that they have been charged with Fisad fil arz, corruption on earth. That's their charge. Punishable by death, the charge puts Ali and Amir Hossein at risk of execution. My own uncle, Mohammad Reza Daneshvar, was a gifted student at the University of Tehran in his final year of medical school. In 1988, he, along with 30,000 other political prisoners, was executed for his simple desire of freedom. I've come to know of him only through sepia-toned photographs and late-night anecdotes with my family. Yet the struggle isn't only for students. Mr. Ismail Abdi, a Tehran Education Union leader, has been held in detention in Evin prison since June 2015 when he led teacher marches in Tehran and applied for a visa to participate in the Education International World Congress. Education International and Amnesty International have both campaigned on his behalf ever since, with Education International also campaigning for the immediate release of another educator, Mr. Mohammad Habibi. He was arrested in 2018 and has been sentenced to 7.5 years in prison and 74 lashes. He was condemned for pressing to improving learning and teaching conditions in Iran. And another educator and teachers' rights activist, Mr. Hashem Khastar, was also arrested in 2018, yet without any explanation or charges. Mr. Khastar is still in prison today. So these individuals are only examples of the hundreds of thousands of students, teachers, families that are being relentlessly persecuted, arrested, and imprisoned for their desire of basic human rights that here in Canada we take for granted. The United Nations has declared on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Yet instead of promoting respect and freedom of fundamental rights, our youth and students are being stolen away and locked into prisons. Our girls do not have access to the same opportunities, and our teachers and professors are demoralized through constant pressure, harassment, and persecution. So I believe that through an organization such as this of the NCRI that believes in and is committed to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that believes in complete gender equality, that believes in freedom of speech that we can come together to overthrow this brutal, brutal regime, a regime that has no empathy and no care for both the people of Iran and the people of the world. You know, we have our own Canadians that have suffered at the hands of this regime. So overthrowing this regime will enable our students, our teachers, and our people to really reclaim their identity and their rights as human beings. So I would like to thank you all for being here today and for supporting our cause for freedom. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having the opportunity. I want to make special thanks to all of the guests who have come here and some who unfortunately were not able to join us. Je dois aussi faire une petite phrase en français au moins pour notre frère ici, Alexis Brunel-Duceppe. Je vous remercie pour nous joindre et je suis désolé que nous n'avons pas eu actuellement la capacité de faire ça en les deux langues officielles du Canada, le français et l'anglais. Alors, I continue in English. I'm sorry that we were not able to do it, the simultaneous translation. I want to concentrate my time on two major issues that have affected directly Canadians in recent years. So the first and foremost is the downing of the Ukrainian flight PS752 that all of you are aware that was shot down by two missiles of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, in January 2020, in which 176 innocent passengers and crew were all killed, including 58 Canadians, and a total of 138 people with connections to Canada, either permanent residents or otherwise. The chronology of events is quite typical of the Mullah's regime. You may all recall, but I do a quick synopsis. Denial, deception, bringing so-called experts in their TV to claim that it could not have been done a missile attack and it would have been a mechanical failure. And when the hard evidence was provided, then they had no choice after 3 days to admit that yes, the plane was shot down by the missiles. Even after that, they delayed for a few months returning or handing over the black boxes just to buy time. And again, this is typical for every scene that we see from this clerical regime. There is nothing that you should believe on. I want to concentrate on a recent finding. Recently, a Canadian investigator, Andre Milne, with the Unicorn Aerospace, was investigating the crash since day one, concluded in his chilling report that this was a premeditated attack on a civilian aircraft. He said, and I'm quoting, I'll just read exactly, the IRGC simultaneously blacked out the broadcast frequencies of PS752's satellite GPS navigation and emergency locator transmitters, or ELT, and continued to jam until the IRGC was able to get to the crash site and physically disable the ELT that started broadcasting signals to the world's emergency satellite network. The first missile struck PS752. He argues this additional evidence of IRGC coordination of what is inarguably a pre-engineered attack against a civilian target by precision jamming GPS navigation and emergency broadcast channels when launching missiles against PS752 and the pillaging the crash site after the attack makes it crystal clear that Iran violated their Rome Statutes and must be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. The report has been given to Ukrainian Prosecutor General and Minister of Justice, and hopefully we can collectively bring Iran to account to this mass murder of Canadian citizens in the International Court. Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. Mark Garneau, called Iran's behavior regarding flight PS752 unconscionable. We believe there is enough evidence to take Iran to the international courts, and this is what we demand Canada to do. Before going to my next topic, I want to ask my friend and colleague Hamid to play a poem by PMOI member Dr. Garai dedicated to Kordia Molai, a child in the plane, and all of the families of victims of PS752. Hamid, if I can ask you to play that small video clip, I appreciate it.
The keeper of that single slipper was found, a child in a plane, her mother with her. Suddenly nothing but smoke, suddenly nothing but fragments in the sky. Remnants and remnants of the remains raining down, that slipper thrown in a corner, her skirt now hanging on a branch. O keeper of that slipper, I ask of you, what sins were you killed for? Why were you taken away so helplessly from us all, in front of those callous eyes who could do nothing but watch? Your slipper is my answer. Your slipper is my truth. You were killed for me to understand, for my heart to know of your suffering. My dear child, your slipper holds a message. Let me take a step in your direction. Let me seek a nation out of their homes to rise and to rebel.
Thank you, Hamid. It's really chilling again to think about all those who lost their lives and all the families who are struggling to get justice, nothing more. So thank you for listening to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Member of Parliament and the Honorable guests. I will try to elaborate briefly on Iran regime's terrorist activities abroad. Since its inception, the clerical regime has interfered in other countries' internal affairs under the pretext of exporting revolution. The regime has used two pillars of suppression inside Iran and warmongering and terrorism abroad to guarantee its survival. For the record, this is embedded in the Islamic Republic's constitution. As you can imagine, it's not possible to cover the Iranian regime's terrorism abroad in a span of a few minutes. I can just go briefly start with this one, that with Iran's involvement, the Syrian catastrophe has become the greatest tragedy that the world has seen in new century. And by creating Hezbollah, the mullahs have led Lebanon to the brink of ungovernability, not to say the systemic collapse. And by supporting the most radical group, such as Islamic Jihad and Hamas, the mullahs have also helped to block the road to an Israeli-Palestinian coexistence accord. Just recently, the commander of the CENTCOM described the Islamic Republic of Iran as the only major threat to the stability of the Middle East. He said that Iran continues its militant activities both directly and through proxy forces, which this previous week, a shipment of weapons and equipment was seized, which was destined to Houthis in Yemen from Iran. Hassan Nasrallah, who is the Khamenei's puppet in Lebanon and leader of Hezbollah, did not shy away in a television interview to say that as long as Iran has money and weapons, Hezbollah will have money and weapons. In Europe, it's a little bit different. And in North America and Latin America and Africa, Iran uses its diplomatic missions to carry out their nasty terrorist acts. These terrorist acts have usually been carried out by coordination of the diplomatic missions, like their embassies, and the Ministry of Intelligence, and the IRGC Quds forces. The examples are numerous, and much longer time is needed to cover all of them. I just say briefly, the truck bombing of the US Marines in Lebanon in 1983, where more than 283 people were killed. Truck bombing of Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. The bombing of the US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Bombing of the Jewish Center in Buenos Aires. And more than 450 assassination and terrorist acts against Iranian dissidents in Europe, Iraq, Pakistan, and US. To name a few, just Professor Kazem Rajavi, the NCRI's UN representative, Miss Zahra Rajabi, the champion of advocating for Iranian refugees, and 4 Kurdish leaders in Mykonos restaurant in Berlin, and former Iranian Prime Minister Bakhtiar in Paris. And the list goes on. Regarding Canada, there was an article that published in Canadian media in 2012, which revealed that Hamid Mohammadi, the Iranian official working as the cultural attaché of the Iranian embassy in Ottawa, he said that Iran uses its embassy in Ottawa to mobilize loyalists of Islamic Republic to infiltrate the Canadian government. And David Harris, a security specialist and former chief of strategic planning for the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, said, I read, Iran Ottawa Embassy operates with aggressive purpose that appears to be well beyond the bounds of the international law and civilized norms and the interests of Canadians and national security. Happily, Canada decided to shut down the Iran embassy in Ottawa. But mullahs took advantage of the European inaction, which nearly had catastrophic implications, including potentially killing hundreds of Canadians and dignitaries, which was luckily foiled. I'm talking about the attempted bombing of the National Council of Resistance annual Free Iran Conference in Paris back in 2018. A plan to terrorize innocent people, including President-elect Mrs. Maryam Rajavi and hundreds of high-level internationally known politicians. It was later discovered that this bomb was constructed and tested in Tehran, and it was placed in Iran diplomatic terrorist Asadullah Assadi's diplomatic pouch, who was working as the third diplomat of the Iranian embassy in Austria. Assadi brought the bomb to Vienna personally on a commercial flight. Belgium's bomb disposal unit said that it was a high-quality device and could have caused a sizable explosion. Fortunately, the European security forces had this diplomat terrorist under surveillance, and they were able to act accordingly in arresting him and his accomplice before they can achieve their goal. The accused were sentenced to a maximum penalty of imprisonment. Assadi's three accomplices also got their citizenship revoked. All these three guys had become Belgian citizens while working for Iran's Ministry of Intelligence, while they were carrying out their nasty goals. But the mere fact that the regime used one sitting diplomat to mastermind and carry out this attack demonstrates well enough that this regime is terrified of its principal opposition and democratic alternative of National Council of Resistance of Iran. It also shows that it will not hesitate to execute any crime or pay any price to destroy MEK and Iranian resistance, which they view as a factual threat. The Iranian resistance presented documents to establish this fact that the regime's National Security Council, headed by Rouhani, approved this major terrorist operation with the direct order of the regime's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. As such, in addition to Assadi and other terrorists arrested as the perpetrators of this crime, the real mastermind are namely Khamenei, Rouhani, Zarif, and Intelligence Minister Mahmoud Alavi. They all must be prosecuted, along with expulsion of all Iranian diplomats from the house of terror and spies that they have built throughout the world. In conclusion, it would be naive to think that by negotiating with this regime, the Western powers can change the regime's behavior. Instead, by supporting the Iranian people and their organized resistance movement, the West and Canada can send a clear message that the clerical regime's days are numbered. Thank you for the time given me.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to all members of parliament who honored us by their attendance in this meeting, as well as all the distinguished guests who spent their afternoon with us. It's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to talk regarding one of the vicious actions of the regime, which has started by the beginning of this regime, and that's propaganda and also the demonizing of the Iranian opposition, which is the main alternative, the Iranian National Council of Resistance and People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. Unfortunately, today I've been noted that we don't have much time, and I would like to give this time to Ms. Dolat Norouzi, the honorable member of the Iranian National Council of Resistance, and hopefully in another opportunity we'll talk more about this issue. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to have you here, and we appreciate your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the time. Of course, I very much like for Mr. Behrouzian to continue. Definitely, I will very much enjoy and get as much information with your speech. So I would have preferred if you would have continued, but thank you anyway for giving me the time and the opportunity. And I thank all the organizers of the Iranian community and various associations from Canada that took the time and organized this very fruitful conference. And again, my highest regards and gratitude to the honorable members of the Canadian Parliament for being with us and for hearing the cries of the Iranian communities and, in my view, the true voices and representatives in Canada that from various aspects have tried to share with you the realities and the agony going on in Iran for the past 4 decades. And of course, I would be at your service to provide you with any further detail if you have any questions. But in order to sum up what I have heard, I can assure you that things in Iran are definitely they are definitely in the fringe of a big major change. We are seeing that the general social economic status in Iran are at a very explosive state. There have been, despite the repression, despite the outbreak of this dreadful coronavirus crisis, that the regime is obviously responsible for expanding it and preventing all sorts of accommodation and medical care that the Iranian people deserve, and everywhere in the world, everyone knows that it is a minimum that any decent government should provide for its own citizens. But for the mullahs, in order to prevent the uprisings and the people's anger and disgust of the whole social economic crisis, that they know the root of it is the corruption and the plundering of all the national wealth of Iranian people by that regime, especially the top officials of this religious theocratic regime and their own very close associates and families, and are spent for either severe domestic crackdown and suppression in the worst manner that I think Seaman was able to give us all sort of an idea of how this regime has tried to preserve its very brutal criminal system in power. And the other, the other area that all the money and all the resources of Iranian people are being wasted by this regime is the export of terrorism, fundamentalism, their meddling, destructive meddling in the internal affairs of various regional countries, from Syria to Lebanon to Palestine to Iraq, as well as Yemen, and even to Afghanistan and other regional countries, in order for them to sort of pretend as if they are a powerful government, while we know that they're misusing Islam and using the Iranian people's national wealth in order to hire and recruit all sorts of terrorists and destructive groups in the Middle East in order to carry out their sinister plans and plots to create this stability and to further blackmail the world community to give in to various illegal demands and immoral demands of this very illegitimate regime. So for the past 40 years, this regime has been condemned at least some 68 times by various organs of United Nations for gross violations of human rights and for the continuation of arbitrary arrest, torture, and executions that goes on unabated in Iran. And this regime is being recognized as the world record holder of execution per capita. After China, actually, the regime is number 2, but compared with the population, it comes out to be the first. So this is how the regime has been able and has tried to survive. And unfortunately, in the face of inaction by Western governments, it has been the worst kind of a catastrophe that the Iranian people had to endure. However, there has been widespread demonstrations, protests throughout the country. And I think the major uprisings, especially in 2018, 2019, and 2020, have shown the world community that the Iranian people are determined to change this regime and to overthrow the totality of it. They clearly chanted the slogans that the hardliners, the reformists, the game is over and your days are over. And definitely this regime soon would be toppled. So our message and our request is particularly for the politicians in Canada, in the rest of Europe, in the UK, that the Iranian resistance, of course, has had the opportunity and the possibility of a very strong support from all various political parties, both in the House of Commons as well as the House of Lords. The majority members of the UK Parliament support the Iranian resistance and from all various ranks. And we are hoping that they will help for the Western countries to stand with millions of Iranian people that have cried for freedom and demanded democracy to prevail, and they deserve it. So what I hope is that I would be grateful as the rest of other representatives of various communities requesting you to be at the side and on the side and by the side of millions of Iranians for democracy, for freedom, and to help for persuading various governments, especially the Canadian government, for decisiveness in dealing with this regime. So please let me cut myself short to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have, but I also extend my biggest gratitude again to you and your interest and for the time to listening to us. And I hope that all of you can also accept our invitation to take part in the huge gathering online conference of all the Iranian community for this international online conference for a free Iran. That would be 10 and 11th of July this year. Last year, we had some over 30,000 locations were connected all together, and we had around hundreds, maybe around 1,000 members of parliament and dignitaries, as well as former officials from all various countries, around 100 countries from 5 continents of the world that joined together to hear out the movement and the message of Iranian people. And also they expressed their sympathy, solidarity, and support for the Iranian people's uprising, for the movement toward a brighter future and a democratic future soon to be prevailed in Iran. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And Ms. Dowlett, it's wonderful to see you. Simon, you're an amazing woman, and I've seen you before. And it's just amazing that you have the strength to keep up the fight. And I applaud all of you for that continued effort. Sometimes we in Canada get so absorbed in ourselves and, with the coronavirus and so many things, and we forget a little bit about the suffering that's going on. And I remember Mrs. Rajavi and the whole group And yes, July 10th and 11th, I will be there because you have reminded me again of the atrocities and the need to continue to push for an uprising in Iran. I can assure you that I will continue to work with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Prime Minister to make sure that your voices are heard, because that's part of a role of a parliamentarian. But it's also a major responsibility for all of those who continue to be imprisoned and who continue to be murdered and killed and all of the rest of it. It will not stop unless there is an uprising, and with that uprising, you need the support of the rest of the world. So Shahram, thank you so much for the invitation today to be here. God bless all of you. Know that we care, even though sometimes you may think we don't. We're so fortunate to live where we live, but that also means we have a responsibility to fight for you to have that same freedom and democracy in Iran. And so please know that our government very much is concerned, very much cares about what's going on in Iran, and that count on us, that we'll be there for you. And we'll see you on July 10th and 11th. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you so much, Judy.
Thank you
Great.
very much, Judy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Michael, do you have anything to add?
Thank you very much, Shahram, and thank you to everyone, Ms. Dowlett, Simon, for your harrowing testimony that highlights the enormity of evil that is the Iranian regime, the systematic human rights abuses that have been carried out for the last 40 years. You spoke about the bloody summer of 1988, and we know that there are many high-level Iranian officials who were involved in those atrocities 30 years ago. And we need to lend our voices to see that justice is eventually done, and that those individuals responsible for those atrocities and the atrocities that are taking place in Iran today are brought to justice. And I think that today illustrates that there is common ground in the Canadian Parliament. We have members of Parliament from all parties here today stand in solidarity with the resistance of the Iranian regime. That being said, I think there are measures the government of Canada can take today. 3 years ago, the Canadian House of Commons overwhelmingly voted to list the IRGC on Canada's terrorist list. The government a few months ago added 13 groups to that terrorist list. I believe that it is important that the government follow through on the will of members of Parliament 3 years ago and finally list the IRGC. We know that they have played the leading role in advancing terrorism throughout the world, and they have the blood of 55 Canadians on their hands from the downing of PS 752. It's time that take place. And finally, I will say, just with regards to July, that I look forward to attending. I hope that many of my other colleagues will be there. I had the opportunity, I know, with Judy Scrow and Candace Bergen and others to attend in 2016 in Paris, and hopefully we will be able to have an in-person rally soon. But I look forward to participating virtually in July. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your remarks. And I want to, I know we have been a bit over time, but if any other of our colleagues have, parliamentarians have any questions that they want to raise, and I can also promise, at least from my perspective, Iran Democratic Association, because as Mr. Behrouzian said, it's impossible to cover all aspects of the Iranian regime in a span of few minutes, especially the topic that he wanted to talk about. It needs other meetings like this to take place, and I encourage everyone to participate in the upcoming events. But regardless, if anyone has any questions right now that they want to ask either Ms. Nawrouzi or any one of us, we are at your service. I want to once again recognize everyone who participated from west to east to Quebec. Encore une autre fois, je suis désolé que nous n'avons pas eu la chance de faire ça en français, Alexis, mais je crois que vous pouvez l'augmenter à vos collègues au bloc aussi. Alors, now it's, if anyone wants to say anything, it's all yours. Otherwise, then we would end it and thank everyone again, both the current and former members of parliament and those who showed interest. Anyone wants to say anything from our parliamentarians to add anything? Kenny Chu, go ahead, Kenny.
Well, thank you, Sharam. You know, it's been already said by both Honorable Judy Scroll and my colleague Michael Cooper as well. So I'm not going to repeat what they said there, but what I'm also concerned about are Iranian Canadians, yourself, advocating inside our country for the betterment, for the benefits of Iranians over there. The influence and the pressure and the subjugation of influence by the Iranian regimes in Canada. This has been already identified by our national security apparatus as a concern, and as well as the infiltration and the influence of Iranian regimes in Canada. This is something that we also need to put a focus on, as the oppressive regime are gradually forming an alliance internationally, sharing their experience and their technology of facial recognition, big data, and all that. We must stand together with other countries sharing similar values in countering that, protecting our own Canadians, everybody here, as well as to make sure that there are justice, peace, and human rights respect overseas. So we're here to support you. We're here to protect you. Thank you for your invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Greatly appreciated. And Honorable Wong, Alice Wong, and then Alexis Brunel. Go ahead, Ms. Wong. You have to unmute yourself. Let me just, no, you are still muted. Just give me 1 second. If
Thank you. It's been very touching, and as you know, as I said in my chat, that as a member of Parliament for, and also the member of status women, we're there to protect women and girls in Canada, but at the same time, we cannot neglect what's happening overseas. So from what we just seen, you know, and watched and listened, you know, I mean, the kind of injustice and the oppression for women and girls in Iran actually should be, you know, should be really not taken lightly. So I just want to show my support for my fellow women and girls. We are with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alice, and greatly appreciated. And thank you for your presence. And I'll now ask Alexis.
Thank you so much, Sharam. As you know, English isn't my first language, so I'm sorry about it. I won't maybe not be able to be as good as my other parliamentarian colleagues, but I just want to thank you. Thank you for this invitation. It really touches me in the heart. I want to say to you that I'm with you. I'm besides you. My political party is, but as we can see, all parties are, and I think this is very important to underline this, that this is a transpartisan. This is transpartisan, and we have to be that way. We have to stay that way, and I think we will. So it's very touching for me to be here with you. I know it's the first meeting for me of numerous ones that will come, and I'm looking forward to be there in July with all of you. And I'm so pleased and so grateful for your invitation. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexis, encore. But thank you also for your presence and your support. And as I promised even in, I guess, in the meeting that we had, now this year is online. We hope that next year it's going to be in Iran. If it is not, hopefully it's going to be in person somewhere in Europe or somewhere. But let's all hope to join hands to make it happening next year, to invite all of you in Iran. So if there is anyone else to make any question or comments, I ask them to do. Otherwise, we'll finish with a big thank you to everyone who participated. Anyone else to make any comment? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, so
Shahram, if you please allow me to again thank all the honorable members of parliament. They're very much grateful to your support. And of course, we are honored to have you with us, and you spoke excellent and you shared your concerns with us, and we are just very grateful and deeply appreciate and moved by your support. And I can assure you that it would give all the Iranian communities inside and outside, and especially our young generation and the youth that are at the forefront of uprisings in Iran, this support for them is very heartwarming, and you can be assured of it. So it will definitely, as you know much better, they are the ones that make this happen, make the change happen. But your support and dedication to be their voices, to be on their side, is very important and very helpful, and gives them further motivation to stand against the repression that exists, which is unbelievable. But I am sure that they can overcome it, and they are very much determined to do so. So thank you again. And I'm so grateful, especially to Judy, to Michael Cooper, and all the other honorable members of parliament from all various parties and different parts of Canada. We're so honored to have you with us. Thank you so much. And we are looking forward for other further, hopefully, events that would be organized. And of course, definitely the July international event. Thank you so much again.